Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior English A, and our objective now is to continue with our conversations on Hamlet. I'm with you now in Hamlet 1.3. It's my objective to finish with 1.5 and then move on to Hamlet 2. You've already listened to the play in the first act. Now we're talking it through. Let's summarize. Hamlet Act 1, to help you with the writing assessment that's coming next Monday. Hamlet Act 1, Scene 1, we will find, of course, the major themes of the play, many of them being introduced, and of course we will be introduced to the ghost of Hamlet's father and Horatio's determination that he's going to go and tell Hamlet. 1-2 is a monumental scene in that we will meet Hamlet's stepfather, of course his mother, and his mother will use that word. What word is it that she uses that so upsets Hamlet? What seems. Word? It's the word seems. Well, you seem really upset. To which Hamlet's response is, I have that within which passeth show. I'm not just acting. These, this black dress or whatever, but the trappings and the suits of woe. Then we find out from his too solid flesh soliloquy that Hamlet is prepared to do what? What would he like to do if Providence had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter? Let's put it in our notes. This is a play that contemplates suicide over and over again. Dude, if I right now walked up to anybody on the streets of Worland and went, to be or not to be, they would go, that is the question. They may not be able to tell you that those lines come from the play Hamlet or from the center of the play Hamlet, but they probably, certainly, unless they've been well educated, have no idea that the to be or not to be soliloquy is a soliloquy that Hamlet will give in the middle of the play on self-sacrifice, on suicide. Ophelia, I've already told you, will end her life by how? Suicide. That's right. So this is a play in which you're going to have some major themes regarding death and suicide ever present. What is it that's so upsetting the young man Hamlet?
Like how fast.
How fast his mother remarried. That's pretty much it, guys. It's interesting. Are you ready for this, Mr. Durant? It almost seems as if Hamlet is less upset about his father's death than what? Right, his mother's remarriage. It's not so much that his daddy died that seems to offend him, as much as it is that his mother turned around and remarried. Now, technically speaking, his mother should have waited as a queen in mourning, should have waited a full year before she would ever consider remarrying. Okay? And so to that degree, we've got Hamlet's mama working quick and fast. What does Hamlet call this relationship? Incestuous. To post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets means Hamlet is not pleased, and yet he says it again, but break my heart, but what? But break my heart, for I must what? He says, I'm really sad, because as upset as I am about it, I can't talk about it. I got to hold my tongue. I can't talk about it. He is stuck in a moment. Let's put it in our notes that way, and we're going to see this over and over again. Hamlet is stuck in a moment out of which he seems to not be able to extricate himself. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. He will finish 1-2, and now we're ready for 1-3. Hamlet will say, foul deeds will rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes. In other words, something is wrong. My father's ghost walking the battlements is a bad sign. Something's bad. He says, I would that the night would come. I can't wait until I get the opportunity to see my father's ghost. 1-3. Let's work through it quickly. 1-3 is the introduction of Ophelia. Now, it's important that when we meet Ophelia today, in presentations today, Ophelia has to be an actress who is drop-dead gorgeous. That's important. But she's not a Victoria's Secret kind of gorgeous. She is a young, innocent, very pure kind of gorgeous. That's what I mean. And Hamlet, of course, and Ophelia have a thing. They've been having a thing for a while. Laertes, Ophelia's bro, will come to her and say, I'm a little concerned about this thing with Hamlet. She is young and naive. What? He's like a really nice guy and he writes nice notes to me and stuff. Laertes will say as big brother, are you kidding me? Don't be so stupid. The reality is there ain't but one thing that Hamlet can want from you, and after he gets it, he's gonna bolt. Why? Because he's the son of a king. He cannot choose who he marries. As the son of a king, His father and mother will determine who he marries because it will become a political union. In other words, he's going to have to marry a princess at some point. And that means he's only messing with your head and maybe messing with your body. And to that degree, leave him alone. Her response is, well, yeah, I'll listen to what you're telling me about, showing some sexual discipline. But I ain't the one going away to college in Paris. You are. And so she says to her, bro, don't forget kind of what you're saying to me. And about that time, when Laertes says, you don't got to worry about me, I take care of myself, Polonius, Laertes and Ophelia's father, comes onto the stage. Now, let's identify a couple of things about Polonius. And 1:3 is important because we meet this old fart for the first time. I want to pause for a moment and make this observation. And this will work. I'm sorry?
You mean from the second time? Because he shows up?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of his character development. I mean, obviously, he has wrung from me by labor some petition, that kind of thing. A couple of lines in 1:2, you'll recall. But now we're going to get to really meet him for the first time. I've said this maybe before to you, but now I want to drive it home. Shakespeare loves to give some of his most important lines to his children, his fools, and his idiots. You see this often in his plays. Give me an example. This is a 4-2 question. I'm sorry, a 3-8 question. Give me an example from Macbeth where really important lines are spoken by either a fool, an idiot, or a child.
And the honest men, or the liars are all fools.
And what act and what scene was that from? We wrote a paper so that we could put it in our brains as such. Act 4, Scene 2. I'm impressed that you would remember that on a morning such as this, a bit frosty outside. You're absolutely right. Remember, a child is the one who says, well, the liars and swearers are fools, because there's a whole enough of them to hang all the good men and take over. Remember? We will now hear from Polonius. Polonius is the old fart. He's the guy who starts talking and forgets what he was saying. He's the guy who wants to give advice. And this advice, ironically, this advice becomes advice that young school children really do memorize. It becomes very popular advice. Let's look at it real quickly. What is it that is the advice of Polonius? Line 55 or so of 1:3. Here, Laertes, aboard, aboard, for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sail and you are stayed for. In other words, old dad says what to his son? What's he say to his boy? What's he say to him? Come on, Laertes, what? Yeah, the ship's ready to sail. Come on, let's go. I got to get you to the ship. In other words, he says, hurry up. But then notice the irony. But then he says, but first wait. I got to give you some advice. Laertes has to stand and listen to the old man give him some advice. For your notes, during the course of the play, Polonius will violate almost every one of these rules himself. But he's one of those dads that loves to give advice, even though he himself maybe can't follow it. You maybe are familiar with 1 or 2 adults like this, who like to give advice, but they themselves never seem to follow the very advice they give. Take a look at what he says. But there my blessing with thee, he says, and these few precepts in thy memory look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue. Now we're going to ask you to put this in your own words. This is called the advice of Polonius. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. What's that mean? Put it in your own words. What's he just told his boy to do? What's his first bit of advice? Give thy thoughts no tongue. Some of you will say, man, this is like really good advice for seniors who are about to graduate and go off into the big bad world. What's the first thing he says to his boy?
Don't say what you think.
Yeah, don't always let people know what you're thinking. You got to be a little bit more shrewd than that. In other words, when you meet people, don't just assume about them that they're going to take care of you and start blah, blah, blahing what you really think. For example, you don't show up in a bad neighborhood and talk about how much money you're carrying in your back pocket. In other words, don't always tell people exactly what you think. Some of us are accustomed to being able to speak exactly what we think because we've grown up in a small community where we can get away with it. But Polonius' suggestion to Laertes is always be careful and don't always let people know exactly what you're thinking. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. You got any idea what that one means? Be familiar, but by no means vulgar. And it may be here that your sidebar, your page on the other side will help you as you're looking with your inner folio. What's this one mean? How would you put it in your own words? Be familiar, but by no means vulgar. What does that one mean? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Be
friendly.
Be friendly, but don't be what? Right, don't be over-friendly. So in other words, be really friendly, but don't be over-friendly. You don't want people to have the wrong impression of you early on. Look at the next one. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, boy, oh boy, is this a good one. Those friends thou hast in their adoption tried, grappled them to thy soul with hoops of steel. Uh-oh, what's that mean? It's an interesting word picture. He says, if you are privileged enough to have a friend, grapple that friend to you with hoops of steel. Word picture meaning what? If you're blessed enough to have a good friend in your life, what about that good friend? You better take good care of that good friend. Don't jack with your friendships, because the most important thing in your life are the few friends that you have. Polonius will say to Laertes, you don't want to be like in middle school where everyone is your best friend. You're only going to have a couple of people in your life that you constitute as a true friend. When you get one, hold on to him or her, because they don't come along very often. They are a privilege and a blessing. Look at the next one. He says, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged comrade. You know what that one means? Put that one in your own words in your notes. Any idea what he's saying here? Every time somebody comes up to you and comes up with a plan, right? Don't just jump on board. Don't be an idiot, in other words. Be smart in regards to your relationships with other people. Look at the next one. This is always a fun one. Some of you were maybe told this by parents at home when you were in middle school. Watch this one. Beware of entrance to a quarrel. Meaning what? Don't get in a fight. But being in other words, you are in the fight, bear it that the oppressed may beware of thee. In other words, what? Some of you maybe grew up with this kind of message. Don't start the fight, but if it happens that you get pulled into a fight, you better be the one that walks away. In other words, you better end it. Take care of your business. Don't start quarrels, but if somebody wants to jack with you, don't back down. Step up and take care of business and walk away. This is Polonius' advice to his boy. Look at the next one. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. What's that one mean?
Listen to talk all the time.
Yeah. It's a fool who's always talking. It's a wise person who just sits and listens, hears what people have to say, and doesn't always have to give an opinion all the time, right? Look at the next one. Take every man's censure, but reserve judgment. Here, people criticize, but don't always feel like you have to respond back. You can hear people's opinions without having a response back. Look at the next one. This is interesting. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy. What's that mean? Can anyone guess before you have to look at the sidebar to tell you what this one is? What is one's habit? Do you know? Now, of course, a habit, Mr. Nelson, is something we do repetitively. But the word habit also can mean what? Does anyone know?
Dress.
It literally means how you dress. Now, this is fascinating, and I've often had students who will report that's one of the major differences between high school and college, or moving out of a small community into the city. People define you, in large measure, Polonius says, by the clothes you wear, by the way you present yourself, by the way you wear your hair or you wear your clothes. People make determinations about who you are. Because you know that's the case, no one's arguing whether that's fair or not, but because you know that's the case, buy the very best clothes you can. Look what he says next. For the apparel or the clothing oft proclaims the man. In other words, the way you dress says a lot about you. It says who you are or what you want to be. And they in France of the best rank and station, and of a most select and generous chief in that, the French know how to dress, he says to his boy. Don't make me look bad, son. In other words, if you go to Paris, if you're going to spend money, spend it on looking good. Why? Because people make assumptions about you by virtue of the way that you look. Got me? Some of you will remember these lines the very first time you go in for a real job and you got to do an interview. And the night before, that will be in your mind. What kind of presentation will I want in this interview? And of course you have to vary it, don't you? If you're going in, for example, to try to get a mechanic's position as a diesel mechanic, you probably don't want to show up in a three-piece suit. On the other hand, if you're showing up to try and get a job in an establishment like a bank or something, you probably will need to modulate your fashion decision or you won't have a chance to get the job. That's what Polonius is saying. Be smart in the way you dress, in other words. Neither, oh boy, could some of us hear this advice when we're 20. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. Well, what's that one say? Don't borrow money, and be very cautious about lending money, who you give money to. Look what he says. For a loan oft loses both itself and friend. Whatever you do, don't loan money to your friends. Why?
Lose the money.
Right. If they don't pay you back, you're going to be offended by the fact they don't pay you back, and you could lose the friendship as well. Bad idea. Right? This above all. Now, here we go. We're to the very end of Polonius's, hey, Laertes, note the irony. Hey, Laertes, you need to hurry up. Oh, yeah, let me spend 15 minutes giving you advice. Got me? Or see the irony. This above all, though, he says, to thine own self be true. And it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Put that one in your own words in your notes. Polonius says, if I can give you one piece of advice, this is it. Above all, to thine own self be true. What's that mean? What's that mean? To thine own self be true.
Be yourself, don't change.
Be yourself and who you are, right? To thine own self be true. And it follows as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Be honest to yourself, and you'll always be honest to other people. The worst lie is the lie you tell to yourself, right? If you can't be honest to yourself, you will never be honest to other people. That's his observation. Dark irony, put it in your notes. Polonius is the liar of our play. Dark irony, right? He is the one who is constantly engaging in duplicity, doublespeak. We'll see it right away in 2:1 of Hamlet. Laertes is like, yeah, kid, typical kid. Yeah, I gotta go. And he will say to his sister, now, hey, sis, remember what I said to you? She says, you got it, I will. To which then he leaves, and Polonius says, what were you guys talking about? And Ophelia says, something touching my Lord Hamlet. Polonius will say, yeah, that's right. We need to talk about that. Daddy will say the exact same thing that brother said in a word. What is it? All Hamlet can do is ruin you. That is to say, sleep with you, get you pregnant, and make you look like a complete fool. And in the process, he says, you're going to make me look like a fool. And then he says it to her. This above all, he says, you will not talk to him, see him, smell him. You get the picture. The final lines, take a look at it. What does she say at the very end? Okay, I will obey you. Question. If dads today tell daughters who they can and cannot date, do daughters say, okay, and then go and do the opposite? Or do they say, no, you can't tell me what to do? What's the smart, or there's a third option. Do girls today say to their daddies, you're my dad and I know you love me and you're wanting to take care of me, and if you tell me not to even talk to this guy or look at him, I'm going to listen to you and obey you. There is a third option. Do you think that one applies at all anymore? Chris goes, no, I don't think so. What's the normal modus operandi today, do you think? If daddies tell daughters, do they say, yeah, sure, good idea, you're right, he's a crummy guy, and then you walk out of the room and text him? Is that kind of how that, is that one kind of how that works? Wait a minute, I thought dads should have all the power and daughters should do exactly what they're told. Right or wrong? Now this begs a really intriguing question though, because here in a few years, one or two of you are going to have a daughter. And that's going to make it very interesting when it becomes now full circle. Do you think parents should ever get involved in the dating life of their kid?
Yeah.
Should dads and moms have any power in this at all? Should they have an opinion?
I think if it's extenuating.
Extenuating meaning they're worried about him.
Yes.
If they're worried about him. Well, Polonius is clearly worried about his daughter Ophelia. Right?
Right.
Does he have any right to say to Ophelia, Hamlet's bad news, you better stay away from it? By the way, let's get this straight. Polonius was kind of right. In this play, Ophelia is going to get jacked up. And one of the reasons is because of Hamlet. So Polonius is kind of right.
But does he do it on purpose?
See, that's the issue, right? Polonius was right without realizing he was right, correct? It's not like Hamlet intentionally wants to hurt Ophelia. It's that, again, he's stuck in a moment out of which he can't escape. It's fairly clear in this play that Hamlet and Ophelia are a thing, and they've been a thing for a while, and they've been a pretty good thing. That's fairly clear, although we don't have any direct idea of this. We have indirect ideas of this. Polonius is concerned, though, because he thinks that Hamlet can only be trying to get with Ophelia to mess her up. Got me? To get some, especially sexually, to just enjoy her. And then he's going to have to leave her because he can't marry her. And to that degree, he'd ruin his daughter. Should dads get involved at that level? Or should they just leave it alone and let their daughters make their own decisions? Should mothers get involved in having conversations with sons? You see it as different for guys. So it's different for guys than for girls. Parents should look closely at who a girl dates, but they really don't care who the guy dates.
It's a double standard.
It is a double standard, Mr. Lang says. Do you feel, Cruz, that it should be a double standard? Because why? Why is it a double standard? Because what? Girls can get pregnant and guys can't? Lang says, I'm not gonna. And
I think girls are more like not necessarily foolish.
Girls are not necessarily more.
I said they're not necessarily foolish. I'm saying that it's easier to woo a girl over with thoughts that, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and then a man, they think it more like, okay, that's unreasonable.
So maybe what Mr. Lang is saying, is that young freshman girls that were all in high school have a tendency to actually believe that stupid senior boys really do love them and all of that.
And then you tried telling a senior guy or a girl telling a freshman boy that she's madly ahead. The guy's like, yeah, get out of here.
Right. He kind of understands. Do you think that there is some truth to the idea that in matters of love, girls are more vulnerable than guys? Ophelias are more vulnerable than Hamlets.
I disagree with that.
They think, you think they're the same?
I think they can be the same.
The same. Yeah. The same. Ophelia says, I will obey you, my lord. And guess what? Are you ready for this? She does it. She does it. So, which maybe speaks about a different time. Would you agree with me? Back in a time when children obeyed their parents. Why? Because their parents were their parents. It was really that simple. If your parent was your parent, you obeyed your parent, whether you agreed or not with your parent. Do you think we're still there?
No.
Why are we not there anymore?
Standards have gone down.
Do you think it's a matter of kids have gotten smarter?
No. I think kids have gotten more disrespectful.
Kids have gotten more disrespectful. Why? Why do you think kids have gotten more disrespectful
because
today?
Parents got more laid back, and then the kids started taking advantage of it.
Parents do not parent as well as they used to. Or is it that parents can make threats and kids don't believe in those threats anymore?
That could be. Well, it could be both.
Is it a matter of parents are not feared or parents are not loved?
I think society has changed.
Society has changed, meaning...
Like, it's not acceptable to, take your kid out to the wampum shed,
Right. So in other words, you're saying in the old days, Ophelia doesn't have a choice here because Polonius will jack her up. On the other hand, today, that kind of discipline does not happen. And therefore, parents don't have the same kind of power.
Yeah, because kids used to have to go cut their own willows to be beat when they didn't listen. I've been there.
You're saying in the old days?
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the day.
Like even when I was growing up, for a little bit when I was doing a little...
You're saying you could get jacked.
Yeah, you could get jacked.
Things have changed in that regard. I think, Miss Laird, it would be quite fascinating to have this conversation in 25 years. Once some of us enjoy having children, and we can then have this discussion about why is it that I'm telling my kid to do X, Y, and Z, and my kid goes, Okay, and then turns around and does the exact opposite. You know, is that a sign? Is that a sign society is changing, or what is it? All right, let's go quickly to it. 1, 4, 1, 5 are a unit. I don't have to say a whole lot about this because it's fairly self-explanatory. Hamlet's father's ghost will arrive and say, "It's given out that in my orchard I was sleeping and stung by a serpent, but know this, that the serpent that did sting me now wears the crown." In other words, it's pretty simple. My son of a gun brother kills me, marries with my wife, and takes over the throne. In other words, let's just say it out loud, Claudius is not a very nice guy. So in 1:2 we saw Claudius as a pretty decent king. By 1:4-5 we realize, yeah, Claudius is not a very good guy at all. Hamlet, however, is stuck in a moment that we want to put in your notes as a difficult moment. Notice the final lines of this act. Read it with me now. "O cursed spite," he says, "that ever I was born to set it right." In other words, I'm stuck. Hamlet has all kinds of concerns. Let's outline them. 1, he's been told that his daddy was murdered, and it's Hamlet's job to get revenge. Namely, what? What does Hamlet's father ask him to do? Murder. An eye for an eye, or in this case, poison in the ear for poison in an ear. The only problem is, Hamlet is no murderer. Number 2, Hamlet's got serious issues in regards to complicity. Who else knows? Clearly, the ghost says his brother was the murderer, but what about the second in command, Polonius? What about Polonius' son Laertes? What about Polonius' daughter Ophelia? And most importantly, what about Mama? Did Mama know that this was the way things were going to go down? Does she know that her husband and the king of Denmark is a murderer? Number 3, Hamlet is aware that he is a little bit distracted due to his depression. His depressive state by virtue of mourning about the loss of his father and the hasty marriage of his mother. What if he's hallucinating? What if, in fact, he's made all this up in his mind? How will he know to trust the ghost? This will be another issue for him. Number 4. Okay, let's just imagine for a moment that Hamlet actually buys the story. And that he says, all right, I got to get revenge. That means I got to kill the king. Obvious question. 2-parter. 1, how's he going to do it? What do? Just walk up to the old man, take out your sword, and stick it through him? Obviously, there's the second part. How do you get away with it? Or how do you rationalize it? Everybody goes, dude, what are you doing? You can't kill the king. And to which he says, he killed my dad. What do you mean he killed your dad? Your dad died from a snake bite in the garden. He poured poison in my dad's ear, and that's how my dad died. Really? How do you know that? Because my daddy told me. Your dad is dead, son. No, he told me on the battlements last night. Ask Horatio. Horatio, didn't he tell me? Well, technically, Horatio notice isn't there, right? Horatio is trying to find Hamlet at the end. He's not actually there, is he? So in other words, Hamlet's got a serious problem. How do you get revenge and kill the king and then not completely screw up the rest of your life?
Make it look like an accident.
That's going to be a possibility. Maybe he can find a way to kill the king without being implicated of killing the king. How he's going to do that? See, that's another question. All of these answers are resolved in a fascinating decision. Let's put it in our notes now. The decision is to fake like you're crazy. Now, this is a fascinating history, and I don't know if you know about this, Mr. Lang, but during the Second World War, the German Nazis and the British had an agreement that if officers were caught, and those officers were put in a special confinement camp, but if the officers went nuts and lost their mind, they would be sent home. There's no point in feeding them or keeping them alive if they've lost their mind. So British officers began to fake crazy so they could get home. And in the early stages of the war, this worked. And the Germans just put them on planes and sent them back home. And they'd come walking off the plane and be like, okay, let's go back to work. The Germans got smart. And they started sending in psychiatrists who had to evaluate whether, in fact, the person had genuinely lost his mind. And boy, oh boy, is this some interesting research. there were British officers who went nuts, and these German psychiatrists went, dude, that guy is completely Fruit Loops. Put him on a plane, he'd come walking down the steps, look right into the face of the British officers in England and say, all right, let's go back to work. And they'd be like, whoa, you totally fooled all those psychiatrists. Yeah, I just faked madness. But there were other British officers who came down the stairs and they were gone. They were gone. And they never came back. They lost their mind. It reminds me, at one point in my high school career, I went to a high school that was on a university campus, and that university was pretty well known for football. And there was a famous running back who was coming back to what everyone thought was going to be his last year of college because he was going to go to the NFL to run the football. Reggie shows up on a first day of two-a-days, and he walks out onto the practice field, and somebody looks at him and goes, dude, Reg, you forgot your socks and your shoes. And he looks down. He ain't got no shoes on. He's got everything else on. He got his shoes on. Oh, yeah, my shoes. Dude, I got to go get my shoes. Some of his buddies just assumed he was stoned or something. And so they sent him all back into the locker room. Get on your shoes. Goes back into the locker room. He sits there. Half an hour later, like, dude, where's Reg? I don't know. Manager goes in. Reg is sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth. Over the summer, he lost his mind. He was gone and never came back. There's a really intriguing question that we engage in psychology that asks this. What does it mean to be sane? What does it mean to be insane? What does it mean to be crazy? And how do you, quote unquote, lose your mind? I mean, if I were to ask you right now, take out your mind and show it to me, you would say, no, you don't understand. You don't see the mind. Really? Well, if you can't see the mind, how do you lose the mind? And why is it some people seem to be sane for a certain part of their life, and then all of a sudden they kind of lose it? Now, in the play Hamlet, Hamlet will fake madness. What he calls taking on an antic disposition. In other words, he's going to fake like he's crazy. Now, why would he do this? Sometimes modern students are a little bit confused about this. Doesn't that just land him in a, in the loony bin? I mean, it seems that if the one thing you want to do is to try and get close to your stepdaddy so you can kill the cat, then the last thing you want to do is to act like you're crazy because they're going to load you up in a padded, wagon and take you off to a special place where crazy people go. Not in Shakespeare's day. If you are an aristocrat, if you are part of the king's family, you're not going to embarrass the family by being sent away. So Hamlet can be crazy, walk around the castle, speak crazy words. I'll do it in this right here. Crazy words, right? The audience will understand that there's a second meaning to all the words that Hamlet is speaking. So that the characters on stage will go, oh, isn't that sad? Hamlet lost his mind. But we, the audience, will go, wow, that's really fascinating what he just said. There's a double meaning. Got me? Of course, Hamlet will be spying on the king. So let's put that in our notes. And when we pick up Act 2 now, we will immediately identify that we are working with what we will call the spy theme or the surreptitious theme. That is to say, Hamlet has to spy on the king. Of course, ultimately, he's not only going incognito with this madness thing, he wants to get close enough to the cat that he can kill him. I mean, Mr. Lang is absolutely right. If he can get close to the king when the king is completely alone, he might be able to kill the king in such a way that it looks like an accident of some kind. I don't know, dude, we were like walking along the battlements and all of a sudden he stepped up onto the side of the edge there and he slipped and fell. That kind of thing. Oh, I guess he's gone, kind of thing. If he can get close enough to the king without the king's bodyguards. The reason why faking madness makes sense is because after a while the king's bodyguards are not even, it's like he's turned into a child. He's like got a child's mind, he's lost his mind. And to that degree he might be able to get close. The other reason for the madness thing is that Hamlet's got to figure out who else is implicated, namely Mama. Of course there's the concern about Polonius as well, and we might say to some degree, maybe Ophelia. Remember, Laertes is getting on a boat and he's already left. Speaking of Laertes, let's go to 2:1. Polonius is going to do something really fascinating at the beginning of 2:1. Laertes has been in Paris for a while going to school. Polonius, the old fart, calls his servant to him and says,